What is it like to be a woman in New York State who is specifically targeted for her beliefs and acting on them by New York State's Attorney General Letitia James? Well, joining me today is a brand new contributor to Revival Nation News. Her name is Bernadette Patel, and she not only carries this story, but a lot of passion for the preborn child and women in general. So let's jump into this conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it. She has a lot to share, not only about being pro-life, but also about faith. So pastors, listen up.
I'm a pro-life activist in New York City. Not a great place to be pro-life. Our state, sometimes it fights to get like the term abortion capital of America. New York and California are kind of in a battle for who's worse. I'm actually from both states too, which makes it...
I did not know that.
Yeah, so I fly back home to California to visit my mom and sister. So it's like,
oh my gosh,
from one terrible place to another. So for viewers who don't know, and even if you live in New York, a lot of people don't know this, in 2019, then Governor Cuomo signed a bill called the Reproductive Health Act. It made abortion legal up until birth. A lot of people do not know that, though. Mm-hmm. It allowed nurses to perform abortion because before, in the old law, it was only doctors. And it completely got rid of any form of personhood of the unborn child. So pre-2019, if a woman was, let's say, 8 months pregnant and she was murdered or a boyfriend abused her and the baby died, that person could be charged with murder. In the new law, no, it completely takes away personhood from the unborn child. So right now, my biggest goal is hopefully to repeal that law. Our state Senate is not pro-life at all. And so ever since Trump defunded Planned Parenthood nationally for 1 year, which I was very happy about, Governor Hochul, the assembly members and the state Senate have been just wanting to like not only refill all that money that was taken away from their budget, but to add more grants and more money to them to make sure that abortion is accessible, not only for New Yorkers, but for women that come out of state as well. And I really want to stop this.
Yeah, and that's a major issue that we're seeing now, where it's also kind of aggravating because I like statistics and data and trying to figure out, okay, for example, Texas, really, really great pro-life laws, but then a lot of women from Texas are going to other states like New York and elsewhere to obtain abortion. So it's a little bit tricky to figure out what is actually happening on the ground, but also the abortion pill is also a big deal. And so what do you know anything about what's happening in New York? Obviously, I think their laws are full gamut. We're just going full blown pro-abort. What is it with regards to abortifacients?
So New York City, and this was 3 years ago when Mayor Eric Adams was in power, started a program that just for New York City, any woman can order the abortion pill from a state website and have it shipped to her house for free. That's New York City. But in the state, they offer that as well. It's so prevalent. And then one of the worst things is that we have doctors in our state shipping the pills to Texas, to Louisiana. There was a high-profile case, I believe, either last year or 2 years ago, where an abortionist, Margaret Carpenter, was caught shipping abortion pills to a young woman in Louisiana and another woman in Texas. Texas and Louisiana tried to sue, and then Governor Hochul said, "You are not, no." And so it's frustrating because how are you going to stop people from just shipping these illegal drugs over? It's frustrating because it's so accessible. So if a woman is just having it come in her mail, how are you going to even talk to her? How are you going to even sidewalk counsel her? And so we are seeing like this weird discrepancy where like women are just at home taking the pill and we can't talk to them. But when they come to Planned Parenthood or when they come to other abortion facilities, they're much later in pregnancy. And so it's like kind of a bell curve where it's like really early and then really late. And it's just sad. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember I lived up in Canada previously and trying to understand, oh my gosh, what is, obviously the abortifacients are a big deal, but then I started to dig into why they're such a big deal. And obviously there's a child who's going to die in the process, but even watching the movie Unplanned, and I think it was at that point where I just realized, oh my gosh, there's more to this than what the general public knows. And part of that, what you're saying is there's no counseling. And some people are like, that's really threatening to see a pro-lifer on the sidewalk. And I completely disagree. I've been able to help women in that way, and I know you probably have as well. But one of the ways that abortifacients are so devastating is that a woman could be well beyond the 6, 12 weeks, whatever the prescription is, of when you can actually take these drugs and then be quote unquote successful, which is
Yeah.
the murder of a child. But if a woman is beyond that, she will most likely face really dire, devastating repercussions, one of which could be her life ending.
Yeah.
And I know even putting this on YouTube, people are going to go, oh, that's crazy. But it's the truth. There's so many documented cases. So I wanted to ask you that. Is there documented cases local to New York State where any of this has come out, or is it predominantly when they actually go into a Planned Parenthood facility that we see women being hauled out in dire circumstances?
So this is my friend ran a pregnancy center, and this was when Roe v. Wade was still on the books, and this is
Okay.
when you had to still go in to the facility and get the pill. So she went, got the pill, and then she called us, and we were kind of like confused. It turns out only part of the baby came out.
Oh,
Um, and so when she recalled Planned Parenthood, they just said, keep taking the pill, just keep taking it, just keep. And we said,
no.
no, go to the emergency room right now. And so that was when we
Mm,
still had like some standards of care with the
yeah.
medication abortion. And then I'd also like to point out there was that really high profile case of the woman, I think her name was Amber Thurman, who
Hmm.
traveled out of state, got the abortion pill, also experienced where part of the baby was still left in her, and didn't go to the hospital for 5 days and then died. And so we see this a lot, like the sepsis,
Yeah.
because we have so many women, especially young women, who, because of contraception, their cycles are messed up. And so
Hmm.
they'll say, I'm 6 weeks. And then when we get them an ultrasound, you're 20. You're
Yeah.
20 weeks. And that is very common for us to see. Yeah.
Wow. And that just makes it so much more. I mean, it's all devastating, but it broadens the picture. I feel like it adds color to the picture for people to actually understand that this isn't just a pill you pop. It's not like Tylenol. And actually at CSW, for those of you who don't know CSW, both Bernadette and I were at the United Nations for the Commission on the Status of Women. It's the world's largest feminist conference, essentially. And I was actually face to face talking with this woman who was a I don't even remember her technical term, but she basically would walk women through going and getting an abortion or abortifacients and all that kind of stuff. And
Abortion doula.
yeah, there you go. Like abortion doula, that is such a, it's so warped, just so evil. But she talked me through this theoretical scenario I presented her with. And she talked about how absolutely empowering it is for women to be able to now access through the mail to their own home with their own privacy and agency intact. They can now abort their children. And because they can do that, it's empowering to their careers, to their education, to their families, even. And I just thought that's such a devastating message to even communicate. And she was talking about how, oh, yeah, like up to 12, maybe even 18 weeks that women can obtain these abortifacients. And I was like, I've read the medical journals. This should be like 6 weeks,
Yeah.
maybe eight, maybe eight. Like that shouldn't even be recommended. But it was so interesting for me to hear that. So I wanted to ask you, is that something that you've heard?
All the time you get this like
Hmm.
this weird, like, it's empowering and it'll help women out of poverty. It's going to change and revolutionize the world. We've had abortion legal in New York, I think, since 1970, before Roe.
Wow.
Our poverty rate has stayed the same. It is not helping women, like taking the morality out of it. It is not helping
Hmm.
women with wages. It just increase. It's not helping domestic abuse survivors. It's not
Yeah.
helping anyone really. Um, and in a sense, I think it kind of it puts women down, because if they
Mhm.
have a kid and you're hearing all of this, they feel like, no, I can't get a job, or no, I can't, like, have upward mobility. Versus if you give them the message, no, you can do this. We can provide daycare, we can provide services. We had one woman who was very abortion minded. She was later, so this wouldn't have been the pill.
Hmm.
And like the whole 9 months of pregnancy, it was just really difficult. She was like, there's no way I can do this. I already have another kid. There's no way I can do this. She had a very bad relationship with the father,
Hmm.
but she gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. And now she's a home health aide and she's working so hard, and she's doing such a wonderful job and she loves her children. And so I think that's real empowerment. And that's
Yeah.
really showing women that you can succeed even with a baby.
Yeah, no kidding. And oftentimes it's puzzling and yet it makes sense at the same time to see the messaging coming out of Planned Parenthood in particular because they talk about all empowerment, yet they pin women against their own children and their own biology. It's very fascinating to watch. And on the subject of Planned Parenthood specifically, you wrote an article for us about big, big bailouts during the
Yeah.
2008 financial crisis. And I wanted to ask you, if somebody hasn't read the article, which we're going to put in the show notes, FYI, but if they haven't read that article yet, could you explain to them your experience and what you witnessed during that time?
Yeah, so basically we have I would even, we don't have the left in New York. We have like the hardcore socialist left. Like the head of
Hmm.
the Democratic Socialist Party is based in Brooklyn. AOC is the Queen's District. We have Mamdani. So this isn't like liberal or what you normally see. This is very hardcore left who are very against capitalism, big banks, all of this. And so I was trying to like draw like kind of a hypocrisy, like you're against corporations. And I
Yeah.
can understand like, I don't want laborers to be abused. I don't want, like CEOs to make millions and then like punish their workers. But Planned Parenthood, in a sense, is a corporation. They're very
Hmm.
corporate. Especially the one in New York City has had a lot of allegations against them. They were being sued upstate by a woman who said that they were racist. They've had
Mm.
a lot of scandals. And so if your mindset is don't bail out big banks, don't bail out big corporations, down with Amazon, you should be applying this same logic to Planned Parenthood. We've talked to a lot of workers that are going to Planned Parenthood. They haven't like said, like, oh, I'm being like, but you could kind of tell like they don't like to work here. We've heard
Hmm.
people say, like, I do want to find a different job, and we'll give them resources. So, and we've had a lot
Wow.
of conversations with workers like that. And so, this place, just as a business and as an organization, is not is not like the left ideal of like, yay, we're good to our workers, we're like anti-racist, we're woke. It's the opposite. It's more like Amazon actually, and it shouldn't get bailout or money for that.
Interesting. Yeah, I was reading through it and I just went, wow, how your brain works to connect all those dots was really, really cool to witness and to actually take in. And it kind of changed my perspective viewing what's actually happening because so often, whether you're center or you're right or even on the left, you
Yeah.
often get siloed and you just
Yeah.
start thinking in your own direction and then you don't really look at what's happening in another camp. And that
Yeah.
was good to break that barrier and to go, ah, like there is some hypocrisy, and then are we applying it to our own side? That was really good to hear, and it's actually performing really well. And I just want to say kudos to you because communications are so vital, especially for us as pro-life women. I think that's really important at the UN this year.
Yeah.
I remember sitting in meeting after meeting, event after event, and they were saying how terrified they are about women who are pro-life who are online. And so this is just another way of us getting the message out and being two women who are pro-life and online. It's great.
Exactly.
Now, with that being said, I wanted to kind of slightly transition into what is the future of one, the pro-life movement in New York, but also what are you delving into, investigating, looking at with regards to funding or the pro-abortion movement in your state as well?
Yeah. So the future, and same with your state in Indiana, is looking really uncertain because we want to stop people shipping abortion pills through the mail, but
Hmm.
we're going to need the federal government to get on board with that because
Yeah.
that's a federal system, and if they're not, it's going to be so difficult. Um, and I would say we want to change hearts and minds, and we
Hmm.
want to make sure that we can tell everyone the dignity of human life. But I have
Mhm.
seen women who are pro-life, and then when they find out they're pregnant, they just get such a wave of fear and such
Yeah.
a wave of despair, and they'll make like a decision in an instant, and they'll regret it the rest of their life. But because of that fear and that, like, they can't think straight. I think of it kind
Yeah.
of like with assisted suicide. Most of these people who opt for that, they're not suicidal, but they're just
Yeah.
in such a low point, and they're so afraid and so filled with fear, and the government makes it legal, and it's so easy to obtain that they just do it, and the results are catastrophic. And so I think the pro-life movement really needs to work on regulating and banning shipping abortion pills.
Mm.
um, like, there's a bunch of medication that's FDA approved that you can't get shipped to you. I used to work for a
Yeah.
dermatologist. Accutane, FDA approved, very common. That
Mhm.
it's There's a lot of side effects, and like
Mhm.
they would make every single person go through like a checklist and submit like 7 documents. Like, it
Wow.
does a lot to your body. Yeah, even though it like helps with acne. And so this is common. Like, we can say like this medication should not be shipped through the mail. It needs um, more restrictions on it, and
Yeah.
even like at the most basic level, making sure a woman has an ultrasound before she even takes the pill. Like, just so you know, just for her safety, if you really
Hmm.
cared about women, you would at least agree with that.
Yeah.
Um, in terms of New York, the Senate and the Assembly both are going to put more money to grants helping with abortion. Right now,
Mm.
um, they're not in agreement with certain things, and hopefully we can keep that disagreement and keep some of these grants from being in the bill. One is that they're not just okay with giving money to pay for the procedure. They also want to pay for a woman who travels out of state for her food, for her hotel, and for her transportation to the abortion facility and back. It's
Oh.
insane. It's called the reproductive health. Let me see if I can find it. Um, it's a certain grant called the um, uh, Reproductive Healthcare Improvement Funding Family Planning Grant, something like that.
Okay.
And it's like full scale of how to just make abortion completely free, and it's disgusting.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think it's also hypocritical that the state would pay for this. Let's say there's a woman in Indiana and she has cancer. Memorial Sloan Kettering is a great cancer center, but the state's not going to pay for her to fly over there, get
Yeah.
treatment, and then come back. Only for abortion
Mm.
do they
Good
do this.
point.
And
Great point.
it's insane. Um,
Wow.
Another thing, and I don't know if Indiana's facing this, we have, with trans healthcare, and they want to do an $8
Hmm.
million grant for that to make it more accessible. Um, None of these places tell you the effects of taking testosterone as a woman or estrogen as a man,
Yeah.
the long term effects, sterilization. And so we just want to, as much as we can, just chip away slightly. If we can just take like slightly, a slight amount of money from Planned Parenthood, they will fall.
Hmm. Yeah,
And then,
that'd be
yeah,
phenomenal.
yeah. And then, of course, we got, sadly, assisted suicide passed in New York.
Hmm.
There are safeguards, but no amount of safeguards is going to protect a vulnerable person. One of my friends was given 2 years to live from terminal brain cancer. That was
Mm.
in 2022, and he is still alive right now. And so,
Wow.
yeah. And so we have great cancer centers in New York, and we have great treatment centers in New York. Even if someone's given just 6 months to live, we don't know if that's true. They can live probably to a year, 2 years, but we don't want to rush it, and we don't want to end their life shorter than what God ordained it to be. And so trying to fight against that as well.
Yeah, that was a big one I wanted to discuss was assisted suicide, euthanasia, because that's something that's sweeping across nations, but Canada is kind of a cautionary tale as to what's the end goal where they're now considering it for children and those who are mentally ill. I remember reading a story, potentially they could open it up to, if they haven't already opened it up to young people who are struggling with eating disorders. And as someone who grew up with an eating disorder, it's very sad because I ended up having some of the greatest breakthroughs in relationships in my life that actually taught me through breaking through that addiction, because I believe it is an addiction,
Yeah.
what that can actually do for you as an individual and how you can actually help other people down the line, but also what it gives you in terms of it actually, I'm not going to say it improves your life, but once you get through it, you
Yeah.
actually see life in a whole different perspective. And yeah, it's a dark and it's a sad time, but there actually is a whole lot more life, and life is actually really big and beautiful. And to just offer death, and for not just institution, but a government to say your life isn't worth living, we're just going to offer you to go 6 feet under. It's such a horrible, wicked, and evil thing for a government or even an institution to say about a person's life. But I believe the communication is we need to change hearts and minds, like you're
Yeah.
saying, but we need to actually communicate what this message actually relays to an
Yeah.
individual. How would you communicate that to change a heart or change a mind with someone who is standing in front of you who is considering that?
Well, like I would say that give it just if you're very well, first I would say on the subway, in my normal commute, I always see signs that New York State pays for that says, if you're suicidal, call this number. And
Hmm.
it's just a weird thing to say that some forms of suicide are bad and the state will spend money to protect individuals, but some suicides are good. And so the state
Hmm.
will spend money to help kill those individuals. And so for a young person or any person who maybe is going through depression or through a difficult time, how are you going to reconcile that with them? How are you going to tell them your life is worth living? I mean, not grandpa's life, but your life is worth living and not this person's life. And it doesn't make sense and
Yeah.
it's not consistent. And I would say that thank you so much for sharing that story about eating disorders. I also struggled with that. I think most teenage girls struggled with that
Hmm.
growing up. The 90s were a terrible place to be a
Yeah, no
teenager.
kidding.
Um, and it kind of says to society, if life is slightly hard or if there's some difficulties, then you don't need to work through that, then you don't need to get better, and that you could just end it, which is a terrible thing to say to society because everyone, and I repeat, everyone will have difficulties in their life. Everyone, to the most part, will have some form of mental health struggles. Like everyone has gone through phases in their life where they feel lower or depressed or maybe struggling or something happens in their life. And we want to say as a society, you can get through this. We will help you. We will give you the tools to support you, not you can end it. And it really takes the role of government instead of like helping people achieve life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, it just death. It just
Yeah.
crosses that out and says death.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where I appreciate the pro-life, not just being pro-life, but the pro-life movement in general, where when people actually hear what we have to offer, when
Yeah.
they hear not just talking points, though we have some pretty good talking points, I must say, but when we actually show the love of God through us. And
Yeah.
I know pro-lifers who are atheists. I know there's whole entire groups, and that's our I also look at the pro-life realm, and we're probably the most quote unquote diverse
Yeah.
and in terms of belief, whether that's faith or otherwise. And we actually come together and work a whole lot more than whether it's the big tent Republicans or whatever the left is on the Democrat side. We actually come together and we actually support the dignity of every human being. And we actually work together as a coalition. And that's something that I believe that once the world, or at least our world, our nation starts seeing more and more of our content online, the more conversations we're having like we are today, that they actually see the heart behind the movement and they put a face to it instead of just seeing like a social media
Yeah.
pundit kind of throw something else negative at us, which at that point we're just kind of like bring it on. We got it
Yeah.
all. We'll take the heat. But we actually truly do care about the individual. And I think that's something that through messaging, it's so important. And that's kind of a recurring topic I'm hearing through this is we have to get better at messaging and not just messaging politically, though that's really important. I also believe there's this huge underswell within Gen Z, the younger generations, which are moving towards more tradition, more faith,
Yeah.
more conservatism, even if that's not transpiring completely over to the political vote or the ballot box yet. But there is this desire for some sort of level of morality.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think we need to lean into even more, even harder, because as time goes on, those young people are going to turn into voters. And if we want
Exactly.
pro-life laws passed, we actually have to take a really strong stand morally on these issues. So let's say there's a young person who's just listening to this and they're shocked and horrified by what they're hearing. How does that young person, or any person for that matter, kind of go from, okay, I'm hearing this information from Bernadette and Matea. How do I now take action and actually ensure that whether it's New York or California or anywhere in between, that pro-life laws are established?
Oh, I loved that you brought up faith, and I think our churches are one of like the best places to go because it just has a built-in community. Humans need community. We need
Yeah.
people, and churches are just great at doing that because you kind of there's some divisions within our churches, but when you're in a church, at least you know that everyone here believes in God.
Yeah.
And everyone here believes in a higher power. And everyone here believes, if it's a Christian church, Jesus Christ is Lord. And then you already have common ground with someone, and then you can educate them about the topics. And I think educating our own churches is really important. The women we see going into Planned Parenthood and going into abortion facilities, I would say 90% of them are actually some form of Christian, or, well, we've
Mhm.
had some Muslim women as well, but like some form of faith believers that either like didn't know what their own faith taught about this or just
Mhm.
never heard it at the pulpit.
Yeah.
The one woman I mentioned previously who was struggling a lot, but now she loves her baby. She went to her own pastor and just asked for advice, and he said, do what's best for you. Um, we
Oh,
I know another woman who goes to a church, and the pastor at her church would never say that, but like
yeah.
the fact that she had that experience, and then even like with us, we wanted to do a prayer vigil, and we reached out to a church, and the priest said, I'm not interested in doing that in front of Planned Parenthood. And so it's
Mm.
it's education, and it's really just like kind of bringing our church more into the pro-life side and saying like this is important, right? And it's
Yeah.
not necessarily a matter of politics. It's a matter of morality, and it's a matter of doing like the right thing in the eyes of God. Like,
Hmm.
I shall not kill. That is a commandment, and that is important, and we need to make sure that we are fighting for that as well. And so really educating the people in our own churches, and even like something as simple as like um honestly, abortion. There are Christians that don't know what their faith teaches on that, and it's up to
Hmm.
us to evangelize and be the teachers to people. Yeah.
Yeah, no kidding. I really appreciate you saying that because that's something I'm noticing more and more across the globe in the pulpits, or rather not in the pulpits,
Yeah.
is people who are not willing to speak up. And then there's this growing coalition of pastors. At least I see it more so in America than
Yeah.
elsewhere. But oftentimes that's just what happens. There's a lot of free speech here allowed, so
Yeah.
pastors will use it, which is great. But there are pastors who are also willing to actually speak up, and
Yeah.
they're educated on it. And I think part of our part as congregants is to highlight those voices and to say, hey, there actually are pastors who do believe in the full counsel of God, which also is incredibly pro-life. I mean, he's the author of it, so why would he be in favor of
Yeah.
destructing it? And I often think of that verse from Proverbs 21, 24, somewhere in there where it talks about holding back. We're actually called to hold back those staggering towards
Yeah.
slaughter. And that is a part of standing up against abortion, standing up against euthanasia and assisted suicide, and actually being the hands and feet of Christ. So I really appreciate that. If there's something that you would like to add in here that maybe we haven't covered that you're really interested in happening in your state or with your work, please go ahead. I would love people to hear.
Yeah. So I think one thing too that we face in New York and that Californians have dealt with, but no other, like other states aren't, even the blue states, we have very insane prosecutors and very insane attorney generals.
Hmm.
So many, many years ago, before I was even in the pro-life movement, people of faith came together and would say, we need to really stop abortion. We really need to get this in the root. And so they would go into abortion facilities and give roses to women and say, we are going to be here for you. We are going to offer you one last chance of love to save your baby. And they would stay there just peacefully praying and would get arrested. And so usually for that, it's just trespassing and it's not even a sentence or anything like that. When Biden came into presidency, he really put his foot down. And it became a high profile case where he started putting federal charges. I remember vividly February of 2022, I found out that 10 of my friends were arrested by the Department of Justice and hit with FACE Act violations, $350,000 worth of fines. And it was a very scary time. Thankfully, we're kind of sort of past that, but we're still kind of also, we're always careful. So New York specifically has an Attorney General, Letitia James, who just loves Planned Parenthood and loves abortion. And so we are always hyper vigilant. We always wear body cameras. We always we make sure everything is according to law. And we make sure we are not even doing anything that could even hint at even a little impropriety, because she would come after us like crazy. So was it last year or was it 2 years ago? She tried to accuse, it was the most confusing thing ever. I think she tried to accuse me of blocking the doors of Planned Parenthood, which I didn't do. And this ridiculous contempt motion. She had two witnesses. One was an escort at Planned Parenthood, and another was this woman who was part of this Antifa group. These were not reliable witnesses, but the judge allowed them to testify. One of them tried to claim that I pushed her, which was ridiculous. And it was really scary. She did not realize I wore a body camera that whole time for that incident. So we caught her on tape.
Solid.
What goes around comes around. But these are just the situations that we face in New York. And it's actually, I think it's made our movement stronger, because when you're successful and when you're fighting for life, the devil is going to come at you with all his force. Because Satan loves abortion. Every child is made in the image of God. And when you kill an innocent baby in an abortion, you're basically killing God. And so Satan does not want this to end. And so he hates pro-lifers specifically. But I would say that do not be afraid, that Jesus is always on your side. We were praying for 15 years outside of the largest Planned Parenthood in Manhattan. And last year on March 19th, we found out they were closing. So God creates miracles, and God creates beauty through everything.
Absolutely. What a note to end on. I remember that Planned Parenthood, and when it closed its doors, it was the sweetest day ever. We did a lot of press that day, and we were very happy about it. So
we did 2 celebrations. We're still glowing from it. We were it was just amazing.
So literally, and that's where it's so interesting to watch as all of these pro-abortion locations, well, Planned Parenthood and others that are closing their doors. And that's worth celebrating. That's worth rejoicing, because that's one to however many souls that are being saved from brutal, gruesome deaths, and women from trauma and even potentially their deaths. So it's a good work that you're doing. And I'm really grateful we actually got to meet, and thankful that you're contributing to Revival News Nation, because you're a great writer. You're fantastic at what you do. And we're really blessed to have you working on our side.
So and I love Revival Nation. I just discovered it when I met you, but I was like, oh, this is so cool.
That's great.
Can't wait to see it grow and become like a huge news thing, and be like, I
Amen.
remember. Yeah.
I agree with that. Amen to that. Well, with that, thank you everybody for joining us on this episode. Till next time, take care.
The Bible warns about deception in the last days, but what if one of the great deceptions is what you believe or don't believe about the rapture of the church? I dive into that and much more in my latest book, They Lied to You About the Rapture.